Hey, good morning. We are back with another Wake Up and Ship More. I'm your host, Joe. Today, we are going to do a quick episode on talking about price specifically. And I definitely want to talk a little bit about, in general, just like what it means when like stock price, token price goes up and down for your product. Obviously, very bad markets the past couple of days. Let's see if we go. Let's go check in on the charts and see what they are today. All right, maybe not. So let's actually talk about more about just building products. So one of the things that comes up a lot is you build in a bear market and then you accelerate growth during a bull market, and if price is going down, it's going to hurt everything, and if the stock market's a mess, then your product's going to suffer and all these things. So I think there's a couple of things that we should talk about when you're building product and you're developing anything that really should be in consideration if you're serious about your product. And I want to state this from a point of like, if you're building a financial related product, so let's say you're building a tool for the mortgage industry and the mortgage industry is in disarray, and there's no, like the market's housing market is crashing, like then sure, like your product is going to suffer because your user base is being directly affected by that situation. Whereas if your product has nothing related to something financial and it is just simply, maybe whether it's social based, maybe it's um just anything, whatever it might be, let's say it's an app for a sporting event, things like that. It's if it's too directly tied to the price of something, right? So it's tied to the token price in crypto, it's tied to the stock market being up and down, then you haven't thought through your whole product, because you really shouldn't be, again, this is a financial product, it really shouldn't be affected by price. And so that's where I think we make the mistake sometimes, especially in Web3, that we get very caught up in like, oh man, the markets are down, the markets are up, whatever else. Because if your product is suffering when the markets are down, then what you're saying is that when the markets are up, your product should be doing great. But that's not always the case, right? So like if I'm looking at my product here, right, and I say, okay, here's my product, and if price is down, right? So if I got token price is going down, and then I see my users go down, well, I have to think about like why is that tied together? Like what about is that is connected? So is my app a financial app, right? So like, if it's financial, then okay, that could be the reason why, right? Because now people are scared or they're pulling out money or whatever else. But for the most part, if it's just, set up this way, where you're seeing a lower user base because the price goes down, then it's saying, okay, what was actually driving users to begin with? Because if it's not financial, then it's got to be something else. So we need to look closer at that. The other part of that is the inverse true? So if if my price is going up, so we'll say if my price is going up, you know, then do my users go up? And chances are that's not true. And that's a problem. And that is where I think the issue with issue with adoption in Web3 and crypto right now is really happening, because if I look closely at a lot of products that are out there, you say, look, you know, my user base, because because the token was doing good, it's a bull market, there's more people around, so more people are trying my app. Now the price goes down and people go away. So now you're directly tied to token price. You're directly tied to something that is not in your control. You are directly tied to something that is not directly tied to your app, right? If you do not have a financial app and you're seeing your users go up and down simply because of the token price, you've put some mechanism in incorrectly. And I mean that in a serious way of like when you have thought through the way your product works, it's either not really sticky, it's really not doing something that is of value to your users because they are driven away simply by the token price. And so if you are trying to build something sustainable, then you need to really consider like what does that all mean for you and for your product. So that's where I think it's important to take a step back and really start to reevaluate like if the price is going down, if the stock market, and this is for web 2 as well, like if the stock market is going down and I am now saying, oh, less people are going to use my product and my app is not a financial app, then what are we doing? So we have to balance a lot of this together of where does price and your build intersect. Okay. So one of the things that you need to start to consider, and we've talked about this a little bit when we talked about, app architecture, and we talked about building an MVP, and we talked about like who are my users. Okay. And a question that we didn't really ask before is actually why are they my users? And the reason why we want to ask why are they my users, and this might seem like trivial, right? This might seem like, oh, well, yeah, they're my users because they want to use my product. And so like I built this cool product and they want to use it. It's like, great. Great. So then if you say that and like that's your first part of it, and then your second sentence is, oh, well, the market's down and so our numbers are down. Well, then it says, okay, well, what did you build and why aren't people now using it because the token price is down? Are people not using the token price down because people are not online enough? Okay, so if that's the case, if people are now less online for whatever reason, I'm taking a break from being on, social media because, the stock market's down, the price is down, and then, so my user base is down. So then you're telling me that your product is at the whim of large events. So maybe it's not just price. Maybe price is the thing that's affecting it now, but now large events are going to pull away your user base. That may not be a bad thing. That may be a normal flux of users, and that's okay. But if it's something that is overly detrimental to your user base over time, then you do have a problem. And so here's where I look at some of this stuff. So the next step of evaluation really becomes down to is like, for how long do my users come and go? Okay, so that's the part there. How long do they, if something, let's say again, something negative happens, something bad happens, do my users go away for a day? Do my users go away for 2 days? Are they gone for a week or are they gone forever? And you need to be able to evaluate that. You need to be able to look at your numbers and say, it's not enough for you. And again, this is not, and I want to separate this from like investor talk, because investor talk is something a little bit different. Like I'm going to sell my product to an investor. I'm talking to investors. Yeah, sure. Like they're going to like want to know some answers around like why are your numbers different now. Like, and you can talk about numbers and you can BS some stuff, whatever. That's separate. What I'm talking about here is just for your own building, right? Like we're just focused on like you as the developer, you as the entrepreneur. Like, do you understand your actual product? And the part here that I'm really trying to emphasize to you is that when something negative happens and your user base is affected by that, then do you understand the reasoning why? And do you understand how long that's going to affect you? And the reason is because in the beginning, sure, you can weather the storm of ups and downs because you're just building. You're new. You're in an earlier spot. There's an acceptable amount of influx and outflux, I guess, of users in a certain stage. There becomes another time where it's like, okay, we're a little bit more serious. We're a little further down the road. Now, like, what happens? So you want to evaluate how long. And so that comes down to, again, you know, it goes back to obviously the why. And, like, so it's for not just how long, but like, why are they gone for that long? And then, like, the like $1 million question here is, do they come back? Okay. And that's important to look at too, is if they are gone for a little while, and then they do come back, you know, then it's important to then understand the catalyst or the mechanism here for like why they came back. And if you can start to better evaluate for yourself, why did someone come back? Why did they actually, take that time off because negative event happens, right? The price goes down, the stock market crashes, not even crashes again. Like, let's look at this past weekend, right? Like, really bad, if you were in the financial markets, right? Like, the stock drops on a lot of different things. Stock price drops on a lot of different things. The larger markets as a whole drop over the weekend, the token price, really goes down quite a bit leading into Monday. It's recovered a bit now. It's Tuesday. Sure. Okay. So like you see that, uh, did that again. And the question is here, because we're talking about building, is like my users went away. So like, sure, like maybe they took a break yesterday, because it was just stressful, whatever it might be. Are they coming back today? How long are they going to be gone? Are they gone forever? Is that kind of thing. And when I answer the question of do they come back, like, am I tracking when users come back? So that's where it's important to understand, if you don't have, especially if you have an app like where they're not signing in, let's say, so they don't actually have user accounts, so you can't just like look at like, oh, last time someone signed in. You need to be able to have some reference of, who your users are, right? So this is where, again, and even in Web3 and in crypto, so let's say you don't have a regular database, you're just using on-chain stuff, like you have to look and see, okay, are there transactions happening? Did someone who did a transaction previously on my app, are they coming back and doing another transaction on my app? How long is that time in between? Do I actually start to understand better of all that stuff? And so we need to start putting in some of those mechanisms to do that, right? So let's talk about that a little bit here, okay? So no matter what I'm doing, at any time, I'm going to have my users, right? So here's my user base, okay? This number is going to vary. So we're going to have, right, like we're going to have total, and we're going to have active. And a misconception here is that like this means actually something different for every app. So when you are comparing apps, if someone says like, here's my active numbers, the next question should always be of like, well, what does active mean to you? What does active mean in your product? Because when someone says like, oh, here is a, let's use like Twitter X for example, okay? Because that's a good one that has always, for now, since the beginning of it, had a problem with understanding of like what is an actual active user. When they say like, we have a certain amount of monthly active users, what does that mean? So someone might say an active user is someone who actually goes on the platform, writes a tweet or post now, and posts it, and that's activity. But what about somebody who doesn't want to actually post anything and they just want to go and read? And so they are actively on Twitter, spending a certain amount of time looking at other people's feeds, and but not actually posting. Is that an active user? What kind of user is that? And that user, for probably, you know, Twitter X's sake, is going to be like, yeah, that's just as valuable because they're seeing the ads, and that's ad revenue. And so, right? So, like, what does an active user mean? So, you need to be able to actually define this. And so, what does that mean? And then and then your total is going to be probably, usually again, like signups or whatever. But again, let's say you use a mechanism where you don't actually store like logins because it's a Web3 based app and you're just worried about it's just connecting to a contract. So you're not actually having let's say like a proper login mechanism that you're tracking the logins. Well, then I need to be able to like group this, and it's probably something like, number of users, like with greater than like one transaction. It's a W. There you go. And so, and let's say, okay, so my total users is, let's say 1,000. Active users, though, are people who have at least one transaction, let's say a week, right? And so this is the other part of this too, is right, like, because I need to define actually a time frame. Okay. And that's how I start to determine my active. And so I need to be able to figure that out. Because, again, if you have an event like this weekend where there's a major sell-off and the token price is dropping, it's not a good answer to say, oh, no one's using my app because the price is down. And then, because the next question should be from any advisor that you work with, anyone else who's on your team, anyone else who's just trying to give you advice, would be, oh, you lost a bunch of users because the token price is down. Is it a financial app? Is it a token based app? Like, is it reliant on that? And you say, oh no, it's not. It's not. It's you know, let's say it's a fantasy sports app, right? So people are making their fantasy team, whatever else. And you say, oh, okay, we'll use baseball. I'm American, so we'll say that's a popular sport in America, right? So people are doing fantasy baseball. Okay, great. Well, did baseball stop? No. Okay. Is there games tonight still? Yep. Okay. So why your numbers went down? Because the token price went down, but there's still games happening, right? So like you need to make the logic make sense. And that's the part where I really want to advocate that, like, you as the builder and you as the developer, like, you need to ask yourself these questions. You need to go through this. You need to have this dialogue with better with somebody, but if not with somebody, with yourself. And so we talked a little bit before too, again, on a previous episode, of like you thinking through all of your stuff. Like when I was showing like building out some of the charting and some of the flow charts, again, the reason why I do a lot of that is to think through the process. This is the same idea here. The same idea of like, maybe if you want to blog a little bit, and even if you don't post it, right? Even if you just want to write out your thought process, to have to go through that exercise is super helpful. So you need to ask yourself these questions of like, again, what and why, what is the time frame here? And then like why? Just as I was writing before, is like why are they active and when? You know? And when's important too, because I'm gonna point this out especially for Web3. Where Web3, like, you have obviously a much more, it's much more naturally a global product most of the time. Not all the time, but most of the time, you much more naturally have a global product. And so by understanding when, you start to understand who your potential audience is. For example, again, and I'm just going to use because of my own time zone, but right, so if during the like American business hours, my app is very busy, and then during my nighttime and overnight, I see like the transaction numbers are very low, I know that my Web3 app is probably most likely being used by people in maybe North and South America, that kind of region of like where it's daytime and people are using it. If I'm seeing the inverse, then maybe I start to make other assumptions. The other side of this is too is, again, this is assuming like I'm not tracking anything else, I'm just using transaction data. But it can then inform, again, a little bit of like what should I be doing, and like when should I be focusing on other things. Like I still have to ship an update sometime. When do I ship updates? When do I try to you know add in new features? Who are my new features for? So I need to actually know like when they're active. This also, the when also might inform the why. Okay, so we want to always make sure that we're paying attention to that. Then it really comes down to, if I get a sense of my total, I get a sense of my active, I get a sense of what's driving all of this, I can then hopefully start to break down, you know, the major question is, this is the thing, am I affected by price? And if the answer is yes, not sure you affected. If the answer is yes, then, and again, I am not a financial app, then I need to make changes. So I then need to start designing in a way. And so like we'll go here. So I need to start thinking about then of my feature set. Okay. What about, and I have to start again, it's the same thing that we've been doing here of like looking at it, of like why, what's the why? And what is it? Like what is in my feature set here that is driving, that is being affected so much by price? Like what is it that am I getting caught up in that is leading to, you know, again, less users or less activity during price drops? What about that is likely tied to it? And then you can start to work backwards and hopefully start to solve for some of that. I also want to point out here that I think it's really, really critical that when you are starting to design your product, that you are really thinking about, again, uh, how often is my product going to be used by someone? So here's I guess the way to start to look at some of this stuff, because every day, while that sounds awesome, and that's what you want if like you're a social media company, is maybe not like relevant to most apps. It's nice. It's great to say like, oh yeah, every day, our active user base is this, and daily active users is this number and whatever. That's a hard, and I'll say that that's a really hard metric. I mean, how many, there are certain things that sure you use every single day, but for your particular product to become part of someone's life every day is tricky and is probably one of the harder thresholds to get through. So I don't love that approach. But I do need to have a standard of like, what is my normal time frame for activity? And maybe it's 3 days, maybe it's a week, maybe it's a month. And that's okay, whatever it might be. So, and sometimes maybe it is event based, okay? And the reason why I say event based is that there's going to be times where like you're going to, if you have a product that is focused on particular specific events, not like again, not like external events, like again, like I was talking about here, price, but like here I'll use my own product. So ShardDog, right? So like we're based on essentially somebody, a project, an event, a person using our product for a particular reason. So those are essentially like events, and we look at active users per event, and we look at what are some of that crossover, and not everyone is going to go from like one event to the next, because it's not always going to be the same audience specifically. So like we start to look at again, how many times do people claim something? Does it lead to something else and things like that? And so we know that like our active users are more about like, have you claimed one, did you go eventually claim a second one? How soon after that? We start to look at like, what did you claim? And so, did you claim just NFT projects? Did you claim just in-person events? And so it's more about that. So like our active users are a little bit different, but we also then value by active users of like, does a project come back to us a second time? Do they use it again for something? Things like that. And so you have to just define what that actually means. And it's not always like again, it's not always per day, it's not always per week. So that's part of that. So now if you look at all of these numbers together, if I look at again, here's my active stuff, right? I'm looking at the why and the when. I'm seeing what part of my feature set is affected by that timeline. What actually goes into the why, the what, why, and when of all of that. Hopefully, as I start to design new feature set, I'm actually able to get a better sense of like, is this feature set going to be relevant for what I'm trying to do? And if not, then I need to adjust accordingly. Because as we've talked about before, and I want to stick to this here, is that once you hit a threshold of like, I'm no longer experimenting. I'm putting a product into the wild. I want users to use it. I now need to be much more conscious about the decisions I make regarding my feature set. I need to be careful about, scope creep. I need to be careful about, having products that become bloated. I need to be careful about products that have features that nobody's using and that is taking up my time and my productivity and that's not returning results. So once I'm able to evaluate those pieces and I take that, I can then start to look at, again, what are my active users? What are they being affected by? Okay. And then for my feature set, what then can come after that? So hopefully, hopefully this is, again, these past events this past weekend is reminding you a little bit about for your product of, am I affected by price? And if you are affected by price, you need to really evaluate carefully of like, what is your product doing? And especially if your app is not financial related. If it is not related to something that is a financial transaction, and again, you give people the benefit of the doubt, maybe people were offline a little bit, Monday they need a break, too much news, whatever, their finances are being affected separately outside of your app. So sure. And then maybe even like you say today. But now, like, if things kind of level off a little bit, okay, it's not just constant chaos. And so you can't just keep saying, well, people are just offline or whatever. You need to look at like, what has led to my dip, right? What has led to, this stuff now? Because now it's not just price, right? Now something else is going on. Like price might have been the catalyst, maybe something else. So I really want to emphasize as a builder, as an entrepreneur, that anytime something comes up, again, so doesn't matter if the price goes down and your users go down, if this is the connection, or if the price goes up and your users go up, you need to start to look at, again, like, who are your users and why, and why are they affected so much by this, and why are they so affected by this, and once you can answer that, then I think it's going to really change how you start to plan and build out your feature set. And it's something that I really encourage everyone to take that time to do. So, as we wrap here, and I wanted to make sure I kept this one short because I think this is something that you should hopefully step away from and take a little time to evaluate. Again, have this conversation with your teammates. If you don't have a team, if you're a solo dev, this is a good opportunity to actually go and, write it out, chart it out, take the time and, really evaluate of what's happening. because I guarantee once, if you have not done this yet, and then you look at your backlog of features, it's going to change your perspective on those features. This has to go hand in hand with that backlog. So you want to tie in, again, let's look at this part here. All right. All of this, my time frame of, what's an active user, who are they in my total, all of this really is going to affect your backlog. What is my feature set? What is my backlog? And from there, like, that's really going to be the critical part of all of this. Okay. So I understand if you're having a hard time, numbers are down, maybe your own financial situation is down, and that's going to happen. And I just want to encourage you that if you are building and you are working on a product, to not be discouraged by that, to think about being as best as possible, financial proof, okay? Because, again, while the inverse seems great, of like, oh yeah, when everything's going up, my users shoot up, and that's an amazing thing, and I'm going to get all these numbers, that's awesome if that's timed with like, hey, here's my exit and I'm going to cash out, and sure, good on you, you timed it great, and I hope you enjoy your success. The odds are that that's not going to be you. That's stacked highly against you, and it now just tells you that you are at the whim of, everything's great now, numbers are going up, my users are going up, that as soon as that stops, as soon as that number changes, as soon as the market goes down, that your numbers are going to crash out. And that's where you now are no longer sustainable. That is where you have maybe fallen into a pit where you don't understand that your product is no longer about the feature set, it's about a price that you have no control over. So please be considerate of that. Please think about features that are somewhat price resistant. If you are building a financial product, do think about what are the contingencies, what is the plan for when the market is bad, how much does this affect us, can we build in a feature set that allows people to still feel like they want to use our app during this downtime. That's going to vary. Your mileage on that may differ, but I do want to make sure that you're considerate of all of that. Okay. Please, as always, I want to make sure that people are coming and asking questions. If you're watching this on replay, you can always ask questions during. And again, this is something that I think these discussions are important to have. Every situation is going to be unique and different, so just don't compare yourself to another product or project. Make sure that you are evaluating yourself and what you are building specifically. And if you don't have someone, if you're a solo entrepreneur, if you are a solo dev, and you don't have someone to bounce some of the stuff off on, I highly encourage you just talking to people who are within your network. If you don't want to share things that you feel are proprietary, you can just talk about things more in general, and you can talk about things that are a little bit higher level, and just have this conversation so you get some of this stuff out of your head, and you can really better understand what's actually happening. So I hope this is helpful. I want to continue to have these discussions because I think this is important for developers as you're growing as both as a developer and as an entrepreneur, that you are being cognizant of all of these different things. It's something that I have not perfected by any means. It's something that I'm always trying to evaluate and trying to better understand for my own products. It's something that in the past, where I have worked on products, even ones that are financial based, that you have to really think through of how do we make sure that our product feature set is relatable regardless of price and regardless of stock market and everything else. So again, please ask questions. Please join the Telegram group if you think it's going to be helpful. I really appreciate that. Otherwise, again, until later this week, This has been Wake Up and Ship More, and I will see you soon. Keep building. Thanks all.